Have you ever felt drained, as if the entire weight of the world had been placed on your shoulders, and no matter how hard you try to stand tall, your knees threaten to buckle under the invisible burden? It's a strange exhaustion, one that doesn't come only from long hours of work or sleepless nights, but from something deeper, harder to name. Imagine a glass, not filled with water, but with invisible tears, drop by drop, until it begins to overflow. That is what life can feel like for those who sense too much, who absorb not only their own struggles, but also the storms and sorrows of others. You walk into a room and feel the tension before a word is spoken. You talk with a friend and, without trying, you carry their grief home in your chest. You hear criticism, even gentle, and it carves into your spirit like it was meant for the most fragile part of you. And maybe you wondered, why can't I just be stronger, tougher, less affected? Jung noticed something about this kind of soul. He saw that there are people who are wired differently, people whose sensitivity isn't just a flaw to be endured, but a mirror of a deeper truth. Sensitivity, he said, can be the seed of transformation, but only if it is understood. Without understanding, it becomes a trap, a spiral where you lose your own voice in the noise of everyone else's demands. You start saying yes when you mean no. You bend to keep the peace. You live reacting instead of choosing. And slowly, almost without noticing, you stop recognizing yourself in the mirror. You see a face that looks tired, a body that carries stress, a heart that beats faster than it should. You see a person who gives and gives until there's nothing left, and yet the world still asks for more. But here's the hidden truth. What you carry isn't only the pain of others. It's also a doorway. Think of it like standing at the edge of a forest at night. The trees look dark, the path uncertain, and every sound feels threatening. But what if that forest held not just shadows, but also the firewood you need to light your way? What if entering the unknown was the only way to discover the strength you've had all along? Jung believed that what feels unbearable is often the very place where our deepest transformation begins. So let me ask you this. What if your fragility isn't a curse at all? What if the fact that you feel so much, that you notice what others miss, that you carry invisible weights? What if all that was never meant to break you but to shape you? A seed must break open in the dark soil before it grows. A diamond is only formed under pressure that seems almost cruel. And a soul, your soul, can only awaken to its real power when it dares to see its sensitivity as sacred instead of shameful. This isn't easy, believe, I know, because when you're in the middle of the exhaustion, when you've been told you're too much or too emotional, the last thing you want to hear is that this pain has a purpose. Yet if you look closely, you'll notice moments, tiny ones, where your sensitivity has been a gift. That time you noticed your friend was suffering even though they smiled. That time you stopped a conflict from exploding because you felt the energy shift before it did. That time your presence alone gave someone hope, even when you had no words. These are not accidents. These are clues. They're reminders that inside what feels like a burden lives a possibility of an extraordinary strength. And maybe the glass that seems to overflow with invisible tears isn't proof that you're weak. Maybe it's proof that your heart refuses to grow numb, because numbness might seem easier, but it robs you of the very essence that makes life meaningful. What if your overflowing heart is not a failure to contain pain, but evidence that you were designed to channel it into something higher? Compassion, creativity, even wisdom. Think of rivers. They flood when blocked, but when they're allowed to flow, they nourish entire lands. Your sensitivity, too, was never meant to be dammed up. It was meant to flow into life itself. And so the real question rises, what if this hidden gift could become not just something you survive, but the very weapon that leads you into peace, freedom, and purpose? What if the glass that overflowed with invisible tears could be emptied, not by shutting yourself down, but by learning to let those waters flow into something larger than yourself? What if your sensitivity, instead of drowning you, could guide you toward becoming a lighthouse in a dark world? Because as strange as it sounds, your deepest exhaustion might be the soil where your greatest power is waiting to be born. And what if I told you that this hidden gift, the one that has always felt like too much, could become your strongest spiritual weapon? Jung often said that what we call weakness is sometimes the very doorway to the self, the place where our truest life begins. And sensitivity, especially the kind that makes you feel like you are drowning in emotions, has always been misunderstood as fragility, but Jung saw it differently. He believed that extreme sensitivity is not simply about mood swings or being easily hurt. It is a form of openness, a finely tuned antenna that receives signals from layers of reality others pretend not to hear. Through it, the unconscious collective, the vast sea of humanity's shared symbols, fears, and desires, finds a voice. Most people live on the surface, content with what can be explained logically. But empaths live beneath the surface, pulled by tides that seem invisible, yet undeniably real. Have you ever noticed how certain images or words stir something ancient inside you? A dream that feels larger than your own story. A symbol that moves you so deeply you can't explain why. A song that makes you cry, not because of your life, but because it touches something timeless. Jung would say this is a collective unconscious whispering through your sensitivity. It's as if you carry a doorway inside you, one that opens to the symbols and emotions the world tries to bury. Where others shrug and move on, you stop, you feel, and sometimes you ache because you cannot unsee what's been revealed. Think of a stained glass window in an old cathedral. Most people see the whole picture, the saints, the colors, the beauty. They don't notice the tiny cracks running through it. But you, because of how you're wired, you notice them immediately. At first, you think this is a curse. You wonder, why can't I just enjoy the beauty like everyone else? Yet here's a paradox. It is through those cracks that the most brilliant shafts of light spill through. Your eyes don't just see the surface. They see where the light escapes, where truth insists on breaking in. Isn't that your life? You notice the sigh your friend tries to hide. You feel the unspoken tension at work when no one dares to admit it. You catch the fracture lines in relationships long before they collapse. And while others praise the illusion of perfection, you see the light that leaks through the broken places. Still, this gift feels heavy. How many times have you asked yourself, why do I always feel too much? Why do I notice what no one else does? Why can't I just let things go? And in those moments of doubt, it's easy to conclude that something is wrong with you. Yet, what if this isn't wrong at all? What if this is the very beginning of your healing? Because only those who dare to see the cracks can also see the light that heals them. Only those who feel deeply can be transformed deeply. Sensitivity, then, isn't the end of your strength. It's the beginning of it. Think about the times you've been told you were overreacting. Maybe a colleague said, "Don't take it so personally," when you noticed a tension no one else dared to name. Maybe a partner rolled their eyes when you pointed out a subtle shift in their tone. Maybe you've sat in silence, questioning why you alone seem to feel currents under the surface. And yet, hours or days later, the truth came out. You were right all along. This is not coincidence. This is not exaggeration. This is perception sharpened by sensitivity, a perception that cuts through the masks most people wear. Isn't it strange how you've been told your whole life to dull it, to hide it, to toughen up, when in reality, it may be the most accurate compass you possess? Jung insisted that this sensitivity is an initiation, a sacred calling into individuation, the process of becoming whole. To feel what others deny is not a mistake. It is a sign that you are closer to the truth than you realize. But awakening without guidance can feel like chaos. It's like being flooded with images, feelings, and voices you can't always separate. One moment you're overwhelmed with compassion. The next you're weighed down by despair that seems to come from nowhere. You think you're unstable, when in reality you are simply closer to the pulse of life than most people allow themselves to be. And here lies both the gift and the danger. If you learn to listen carefully, to translate symbols, to set limits, your sensitivity becomes intuition, wisdom, and even healing for others. But if you never learn boundaries, if you allow the flood to rise without banks to hold it, then the very gift meant to free you will become a prison. Sensitivity without direction turns into overload. Empathy without limits turns into self-erasure. The same light that can guide, you can also blind you if you look too closely without balance. So let me ask you, how many times have you confused your openness with weakness? How many times have you believed that feeling so much is a curse? And what if the truth is the opposite? That this sensitivity was never meant to destroy you, but to initiate you into a deeper strength. Because the cracks you see in the stained glass are not flaws to be hidden. They are the very places where the light breaks through. And maybe, just maybe, this ability to sense what others cannot is not the end of your peace, but the beginning of a different kind of wisdom. For only the one who sees a fracture can also prepare for the healing. Only the one who hears the silence beneath words can understand what hearts are truly saying. Sensitivity, then, is not a defect, but a sacred instrument. But what happens when this instrument is played without rest, without pause, without protection? What happens when this fragile doorway into the collective unconscious is left wide open, without boundaries to protect the soul that carries it? If sensitivity can open the door to deeper truth, then it can also become the very chain that binds you when it remains unconscious. And this is a hidden trap that so many empaths fall into, not because they are weak or broken, but because they don't yet understand the quiet mechanism running their lives. It works in silence, shaping daily choices, stealing energy, and convincing the heart that exhaustion is normal. At first, it seems harmless, a small yes instead of no, a forced smile instead of honesty, a decision to keep the peace instead of rocking the boat. But repeated every day, these tiny acts of self-abandonment become a prison. You wake up carrying a weight you never agreed to hold. You go to sleep feeling emptied, as if your soul has been borrowed by the world and never returned. In the workplace, this mechanism shows up in the form of chronic overcommitment. The boss asks who can take on the last-minute task, and before anyone else answers, your hand is already raised. You tell yourself it's because you're reliable, responsible, caring. Deep down, though, you know you wanted to say no, but fear whispers, if I refuse, they'll be disappointed. They'll think less of me. So you agree, and another layer of fatigue settles in your body. At home, it looks like always being the one who smooths conflict, even when you're the one hurting. In friendships, it looks like carrying secrets and sorrows that don't belong to you. In relationships, it looks like giving more than you ever receive, and then wondering why you feel invisible. It's in these moments that Jung's words echo with piercing clarity. What we deny in ourselves dominates us in silence. And isn't that the truth? The empath who denies their own needs doesn't escape them. They become ruled by them. You learned with a mask that says, I'm fine, when in reality you are unraveling inside. The social mask smiles, listens, agrees, sacrifices. But beneath it, the wounded self cries out for recognition. You live in two worlds. The mask that keeps everyone else comfortable, and the hidden self that aches from neglect. And the longer you live in that split, the more distant your true voice becomes, until you begin to wonder if you ever had one. Think of a simple moment. A co-worker asks for help. You know you're at your limit. Every fiber in your body begs you to decline. But instead of honoring that signal, you swallow your truth and force a smile. You say yes. At first, relief comes. No conflict, no tension. But hours later, you feel drained, bitter, unseen. The cycle repeats again and again until resentment grows, not just toward others, but toward yourself for never speaking up. Or imagine being with a partner who unloads their frustrations every night. You listen, nod, comfort. You want to say, I'm struggling too, but the words get stuck in your throat. Later, alone, you wonder, why does no one ever ask how I feel? The truth is, they can't see what your mask refuses to reveal. Over time, this cycle bleeds into your body. Chronic fatigue sets in, headaches become constant companions, anxiety flickers in the background of every day. Your mind begins to echo with doubt. Why can't I handle life the way others do? Maybe I am too much. Maybe I am too weak. And your spirit begins to ache with loneliness, the kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone, but with being unseen. The world may praise you for being generous, patient, selfless. They call you the strong one, the reliable one. But inside, you feel like a ghost haunting your own life. This is the cost of living unconscious of your own sensitivity. You confuse exhaustion with purpose, people-pleasing with love, silence with peace. You become addicted to being needed, even as it destroys you. And the tragedy is that the world applauds this slow erasure. They celebrate your sacrifices without ever asking what it costs you. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize you no longer recognize the person staring back. And here's the part no one talks about, the danger that hides in plain sight. Because the longer you live between the social mask and the wounded self, the higher the silent price becomes. A price paid not in money, but in joy stolen, dreams abandoned, health corroded. It is a tax on your soul that accumulates year after year until it feels too late to change. And that is a hidden danger we must face. What happens when you remain trapped in this endless loop, never breaking free? What will it cost if the cycle consumes you before you awaken to it? There comes a point when the cost of carrying the world without boundaries can no longer be hidden. At first, it's small. Fatigue that lingers, irritability you can't explain, a restless mind that won't let you sleep. But slowly, silently, the burden grows. For the empath who never protects themselves, collapse is not a possibility. It is an inevitability. You keep giving, absorbing, smoothing over, until one day your body refuses to move the way it used to. Your energy drains faster than you can refill it, and the day feels heavier than your muscles can bear. You look around and realize that while everyone else seems satisfied, you are running on fumes and pretending it's fine. The pretense becomes another weight you carry, and even your smile begins to ache. The image is brutal yet honest, a candle burning with such intensity that it devours itself. Flame after flame, day after day, until there is nothing left but smoke curling in the empty air. That is what life becomes when sensitivity is left unguarded, a slow burn toward disappearance. On the outside, you still show up. You still say yes, still smile, still listen. But inside, you feel the wax melting, your core thinning. The light you once offered so generously begins to flicker, weaker and weaker, until you fear it will vanish altogether. Have you ever looked in the mirror after a long season of giving and thought, I don't recognize myself anymore? That's the cruelest consequence of living this way. It's not only exhaustion of the body, it's erosion of the soul. The person who once had dreams, desires, a spark of individuality begins to fade beneath layers of responsibility, obligation, and other people's expectations. You become a reflection of what everyone else needs until your own reflection disappears. The eyes looking back at you feel hollow. The smile feels rehearsed. And behind it all lies a silence that whispers, where did you go? Loneliness becomes your constant companion. Not because you lack people, but because you lack yourself. You can be in a crowded room, surrounded by laughter, and still feel invisible. You can be in a relationship and still feel alone, because the version of you that shows up is only the mask, never the true self. Hypervigilance turns ordinary moments into alarms. Every sigh becomes a problem to solve. Every pause a hidden accusation. Your nervous system lives on edge, scanning for storms, spending tomorrow's energy to survive today. And what is more terrifying than that? To live and yet not exist. To breathe, to work, to love, and yet know that the essence of who you are is slowly vanishing like smoke from a candle that is already burned out. If this continues, the consequences deepen. Your health begins to suffer. Anxiety gnaws at your chest. Depression quietly enters like an uninvited guest and refuses to leave. You lose the ability to feel joy in small things. Even beauty, a song, a sunset, a gentle word, no longer reaches you the way it once did. Life flattens, colors fade, and you wonder if you will ever feel alive again. This is the silent danger of a life lived without boundaries. Not just tiredness, but the loss of identity itself. You stop hearing your own internal yes and no, and decisions begin to feel like scripts someone else wrote. Because make no mistake, if you never choose to protect yourself, you risk disappearing. Not in death, but in life. You risk living a story where your name is written but your voice is absent, where your presence is felt but your essence is missing. The tragedy is not that others fail to see you. The tragedy is that you forget how to see yourself. You forget how to stand in your own light. You forget the sound of your true voice. You forget that boundaries are love in action. And yet, even here at the edge of collapse, something stubborn and sacred remains. Jung believed that in the very moment when the self seems to dissolve, transformation becomes possible. The collapse is not the end. It is the breaking open of seed, the emptying that makes space for renewal. The candle may burn down, but from the smoke can rise a new flame. The room that felt airless can be opened to wind and sky. The face in the mirror can learn again to belong to you. This is a turning point we must reach together. Because yes, the danger is real and the risk is devastating. But Jung discovered a path, a map that shows us how, from collapse, transformation can be born. In the next breath, that map begins with awareness, then breath, then boundary. One step, one pause, one honest no. It is small at first, but small choices change the story. Keep the flame, protect the wick, and prepare to turn toward the map. Your collapse is not a verdict. It is a doorway. Follow me to the first marker on Jung's map. We begin with simplest boundary, a breath. Every collapse leaves behind a question. How do you rise again without repeating the same cycle? Jung believed the answer was not in denying sensitivity, but in transforming it. He called this path individuation, the process of becoming whole. And for the empath, this journey can be imagined as a map with 4 clear stages. Think of it not as an abstract theory, but as practical steps, a compass you can carry into everyday life. The first stage is recognition. Healing begins when you admit that feeling deeply is not weakness. It is easy to believe the voices that told you to toughen up, to stop being so emotional, to just let it go. But denial only deepens a wound. Recognition is a quiet yet powerful decision to say, this is who I am, and my sensitivity has meaning. Imagine standing in front of the mirror and, instead of criticizing your reflection, whispering, I see you, I hear you, you are not broken. That simple acknowledgement begins to dismantle years of shame. Recognition shifts the ground beneath your feet from fragility to possibility. The second stage is integration. Jung insisted that we must bring the shadow into light, the hidden fears, the resentment, the unspoken needs. For the empath, this means recognizing limits. You are not infinite, and pretending you are only destroys you. Integration is not about becoming less sensitive. It is about giving your sensitivity structure. Picture yourself holding a vessel of water. Without walls, it spills everywhere. With boundaries, it holds shape, it nourishes, it sustains. Integration asks you to face what you denied, anger you swallowed, exhaustion you ignored, truths you silenced, and say, even this belongs to me. Shadow accepted no longer rules you in secret. The third stage is conscious action. This is where transformation becomes visible, step by step, choice by choice. Conscious action does not require heroic gestures. It thrives in micro moments. Pausing before reacting, taking a breath before answering, writing your tangled thoughts in a journal instead of letting them consume you, saying no without apology when your heart knows it is the truth. Think of these not as small acts, but as seeds. Each time you pause instead of exploding, each time you write instead of suppressing, each time you choose silence over forced agreement, you are planting seeds of new life. And as seeds gather, they break the old cycle and create roots strong enough to hold your spirit. The fourth stage is legacy. Jung believed transformation is never just for the self. It radiates outward. When you heal, you become a presence that inspires others. Your calm becomes contagious. Your ability to say no with peace teaches others to do the same. Your sensitivity, once a burden, becomes guidance to those still lost in the fog. Imagine walking into a room and, instead of absorbing chaos, you anchor it with your stillness. Imagine a younger version of yourself watching and learning. So this is how you protect your heart without losing your compassion. That is legacy, not a monument, not applause, but a life that quietly shifts the atmosphere around it. So what does this map mean in daily life? It means beginning your morning with a pause before you reach your phone, giving yourself the gift of one intentional breath. It means writing a single sentence in a notebook. Today, I will honor one boundary. It means when someone asks for your time, you check in with yourself first instead of answering automatically. It means letting silence speak instead of rushing to fill it. These microactions are not glamorous, but they are powerful. They are bricks of a new foundation, one that allows your sensitivity to serve you instead of sabotage you. Recognition, integration, conscious action, legacy. These are not abstract ideals, but coordinates for your inner compass. And once you begin to walk this map, you will notice how the old exhaustion starts to fade. You will feel the difference between a yes that is true and a yes that betrays you. You will taste the freedom of living from your center rather than the world's demands. But before you surrender yourself fully to this integration, you must know there are hidden traps along the path. And if you are not careful, these traps can sabotage the journey before it even begins. Every map, no matter how sacred, comes with hidden traps. For the empath who dares to walk the path of transformation, the danger is not only in collapse, but in illusions that wait along the way. Jung warned that whenever light enters, shadow resists. And unless we name these pitfalls, we risk falling back into cycles that undo everything we built. There are four in particular that show up again and again, each disguised as protection, but secretly leading you back into bondage. The first is ego inflation, the subtle voice that whispers, "Because I feel more, I must be more." Sensitivity can create the illusion of superiority. You notice what others miss, so you begin to believe you stand above them. But this is not wisdom. It is pride dressed in empathy's clothing. Jung saw inflation as one of the greatest dangers on the spiritual path. Nietzsche warned of this too, the human temptation to rise like a god and forget our humanity. The antidote is humility, remembering that sensitivity is not a throne but a tool, not a weapon to dominate but a lantern to share light. The second trap is isolation. After years of not being understood, it is tempting to retreat entirely, to say, "No one gets me, so I will vanish." At first, isolation feels safe. You close the door, withdraw your energy, cut ties to the noise. But slowly, what was meant as rest becomes exile. You no longer protect yourself. You imprison yourself. The path forward is not to disappear, but to find safe spaces, relationships that honor your truth. Eckhart reminded us that surrender is not escape, but presence. Stay in life, grounded in being, instead of fleeing from it. The third is the savior complex. Many empaths fall into the pattern of believing, if I don't carry it, the world will collapse. You hear a friend's pain, and you feel obligated to fix it. You sense tension, and you rush to absorb it. At first, it looks noble, but beneath it lies exhaustion and resentment. You were never meant to be the world's rescuer. You were meant to be a witness, a presence, a guide when asked, not the one who erases himself to keep everyone else alive. The way out is to remember, compassion without boundaries is not love. It is sacrifice of self. And sacrifice of self cannot bring true healing to anyone. The fourth trap is regression, slipping back into old patterns of submission. Even after progress, even after setting boundaries, the old reflexes return. You find yourself saying yes too quickly, apologizing for existing, doubting your worth. Regression does not mean failure. It is a reminder that transformation is a process, not a single moment. Each step forward must be practiced, guarded, repeated until it becomes natural. Falling back into the old self is not the end. It is an invitation to rise again with greater awareness. So how do we avoid these pitfalls? The key is balance. Between Nietzsche's warning of ego's danger and Eckhart's invitation to surrender lies the middle way that Jung described. Integration, to see the shadow without becoming it, to hold the gift without inflating it, to live present in the world without disappearing from it. Humility, connection, boundaries, and perseverance. These are the guardrails that keep the empath safe as they walk the path. And here's the promise. When you learn to step over these traps, when you refuse both the throne of superiority and the prison of isolation, when you lay down the Savior's burden and resist the regression into old chains, something extraordinary happens. The empath who once felt broken, exhausted, unseen, begins to rise. The very soul that once drowned in tears becomes the one who carries living water to others. And when these pitfalls no longer own you, you discover the secret hidden all along. The broken empath does not remain broken. The empath who learns to walk with awareness, humility, and courage is reborn into power, because beyond these traps lies the threshold of transformation. And when you cross it, one truth becomes clear. The empath who once believed they were cursed discovers they were chosen. And from the ashes of collapse, something extraordinary begins. The broken empath is reborn powerful. And now we arrive at the moment everything has been moving toward. The realization that the empath was never meant to remain a victim of their own sensitivity. The collapse, The exhaustion, the loneliness were not the end of the story. They were the breaking open that allowed a deeper strength to emerge. What once felt like too much now becomes a very ground of transformation. The empath who once drowned in invisible tears now stands as a lighthouse, guiding others with presence instead of drowning in pain. Picture a stained glass window, fractured and imperfect. Most would call it ruined. Yet when the sun rises and the light pours through, those cracks scatter the colors into even more radiant patterns than before. The brokenness did not end its beauty, it deepened it. That is what happens when an empath chooses awareness, boundaries, and transformation. The very places where you thought you were shattered become the channels through which your strongest light shines. The broken glass does not hide the light, it amplifies it, multiplying every color into new shades of grace. This is the secret Jung hinted at, the alchemy of turning shadow into gold. To live as an empath is not to be cursed, but to be called to see more deeply, to feel more fully, to turn wounds into wisdom and compassion into strength. You are not condemned to be drained by the world. You are invited to become a presence that steadies it. You are not destined to vanish into other people's stories. You are called to write your own with courage, clarity, and truth. Think for a moment of all the times you thought your sensitivity ruined you. The nights you cried alone because the world felt too heavy. The mornings you forced yourself out of bed with nothing left to give. The relationships where you felt invisible because you gave too much. Now imagine that all of those moments were not wasted, but seeds planted in silence. And today, those seeds break the soil. The tears become rivers of compassion. The exhaustion becomes wisdom. The brokenness becomes strength. When you embody this truth, everything changes. The same sensitivity that once left you weary becomes intuition that guides your steps with clarity. The same tears that once humiliated you become rivers that nourish the thirsty souls around you. The same fractures that once embarrassed you become sacred openings for light. You stop apologizing for who you are and begin to honor sensitivity as a rare strength. And slowly, you learn to stand not in the shadows of other people's demands, but in the fullness of your own being. And here's the miracle. The very story you once wanted to erase becomes a testimony that inspires others. The same pain that nearly destroyed you becomes a language through which someone else finds hope. You no longer hide the cracks. You let them shine. You no longer fear your depth. You offer it as a gift. You no longer see your life as a burden. You recognize it as a lantern for those still walking in the dark. This is not the end of your journey. This is the moment you rise, whole and luminous. You may have believed that fragility defined you, but fragility was only the beginning, the soil in which resilience took root. Every collapse, every tear, every moment of doubt was preparing you to discover the strength you carry within. This is a rebirth. You're no longer a sponge for pain, but a vessel of light. No longer a victim of exhaustion, but a presence that radiates calm. No longer lost between the mask and the wounded self, but integrated, whole, alive. And so we reach the moral of this entire journey, a truth that must be spoken simply and carried in your heart. From fragility is born a strength no one can steal. Now it is your turn. If this message spoke to the hidden places in you, I invite you to claim it. Write in the comments, I choose to turn my sensitivity into strength. Let this not just be a video you watched, but a step you take toward your own transformation. And when you write those words, you join countless others who are discovering that sensitivity is not a weakness, but a calling. Together, you form a community of souls who refuse to apologize for their depth, who dare believe that what once broke them can now become the reason they shine. And if you are ready to go even deeper, to explore the next step on this path of Jung's wisdom, I invite you to watch the next video in this series. Because the journey doesn't end here. Every breath, every boundary, every small act of courage continues to shape the person you are becoming. The empath who once thought they were broken is already rising, already shining, already reborn into power. And this is only the beginning of what your sensitivity can create.